why President Donald Trump is so adamant that, in fact, he destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities in those strikes over the weekend. And one of the funny things that's happened with that over the last 2 days is he has started to say that the reason he cares so deeply is because people are disrespecting the pilots who flew the planes that dropped the bombs. And that's a really weird, if you will, distraction, because nobody is saying that the military didn't do their job. I literally have not seen that anywhere except coming from him, because he's trying to make this seem like he's doing something, for the military. And come on, let's call it. He doesn't do anything for the military. So it's just kind of, that's a weird thing, but it's part of his absolute determination to sell Americans on a story. And I actually think there's a number of things going on with that. The first thing that I think, and by the way, feel free to disagree. This is just sort of my impressions from looking at this. And of course, I do not have any view into Trump's inner circle. So this is me looking from the outside in. But one of the things that really jumps out to me is the degree to which Trump has conceived of his strikes on Iran as sort of a TV series, that sort of a TV made for TV movie. Because if you remember, when Israel struck Iran, the United States was supposed to be negotiating with Iran 2 days later. And Trump was like, no, we're going to go with negotiations. Israel bombs Iran. And when that happened, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who was also the acting national security advisor, came out and said, we had nothing to do with it. That was a unilateral move. We're not doing that. And within a day, Trump was sort of hinting that he'd kind of been behind it. And now we know from reporting from within the White House, that from sources within the White House, that he was watching on the Fox News channel and saw how it was reporting those Israeli strikes as being, interesting and powerful and a success and so on. And he wanted in on that. So he devised this strike and this storyline that said that he, after many decades now of Americans trying to negotiate with the Iranians over their nuclear weapons program, and I talked last Tuesday about the history of that. And the complaints of Republicans that America wasn't simply bombing Iran, even in the negotiations for the joint comprehensive plan of action, which was the Iran nuclear deal, that was working. But they still seem to want to bomb it because that's sort of their, that whole power dynamic that they're going to dominate things is very much embedded in the Republican Party at this point. So he did that, and then he instantly said, I've totally obliterated their nuclear program. It's way too early to tell. It's going to be a very long time before anybody has any definitive answers. But then almost immediately he named it. He gave it a name, almost like a title, the 12-Day War. And the reason that I'm mentioning that today is because he continues to insist that this is what happened, even though the Pentagon itself has said, no, we think there was damage done, but the system is not obliterated. And this morning, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth gave a press conference in which he was really combative, seemingly very angry. Remember, he's a media guy himself. And he literally said, and I think I can quote it here, yes, he insisted that the president had completely obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons program and said, and I quote, President Trump directed the most complex and secretive military operation in history, and it was a resounding success, resulting in a ceasefire agreement and the end of the 12-Day War. Doesn't that sound like the description of a movie or something? And of course, it's ridiculous, too, if you want to say that that strike was successful. That's one thing, but it certainly was not the most complex and secretive military operation in history, to which people point to things like D-Day, which on June 6, 1944, took a year of planning, involved soldiers and sailors from 13 different nations and their commanders and their political leaders, and ended up involving more than 150,000 soldiers and almost 200,000 sailors. So the idea that somehow Trump has one-upped D-Day with this strike on Iran is just fantasy. It's just a fantasy. So why? Partly because I think he loves this package. It's a made-for-TV moment, but also partly because he is having a real problem right now with reality. And I don't mean that just personally, although I think he is personally having a hard time with reality. I think he is having an extremely difficult time separating out what is real and what is not. But also because as he is putting his fantasy into place, the American people don't like it and they're pushing back, and he's in real trouble. And I'll tell you more about that in just a minute with his numbers. But he wants us to believe his world, not our reality. He wants to say, this is what is really happening. And I'm going to shut up the media, and I'm going to shut up the Pentagon. And this is real because this is what I want to be real. So I think that's part of it. So that's one. The first is the made for TV thing. The second is that he wants us to believe his reality rather than actual reality. And this has sort of a larger version of the argument that his inaugural crowds were bigger than Barack Obama's, which was also just ridiculous on the face of it. But he insisted on it. And that is a sign of a rising authoritarian when they're determined for you to believe their reality rather than your own. Because even if you don't actually believe them, if you say you believe them, you're kind of stuck in their world. But then I think there is quite possibly a third thing, and that is we learned today from CNN, a CNN exclusive, that all the while that the Trump administration has been talking to Iran in, theoretically to come up with a new way to limit their nuclear capabilities, their nuclear weapons capabilities, members of the administration have also been engaged in secret talks to try to end Iran's nuclear weapons aspirations with a series of benefits to Iran that probably will not play well in the United States. So the CNN reporters say that on the table right now are secret talks to ease the sanctions on Iran, to free up billions of dollars of assets of Iran's that have been frozen, and also to help Iran $20 and $30 billion to build their own nuclear plants for nuclear energy. And the reason that's a CNN story. I have not yet seen the reactions to that CNN story. But all of a sudden, it made me recall, I don't know if you remember this, but in 2016, when Trump's campaign for president actually seemed to be taking off because it had really been in the toilet, basically. And Paul Manafort came on board, and remember, and he starts to get help from Russian operatives and so on. Well, in that summer of 2016, Jared Kushner and Michael Flynn, who was later to be Trump's national security advisor, and he had to resign. And after it turned out he was talking to the Russians and shouldn't have been. And then he lied to the FBI, and, that's its own rabbit hole I won't go into. But they started a company, and the company was called IP3 International. And IP3 International stood for International Peace, Power, and Prosperity. And that was a company that was designed to work with Russia to build nuclear reactors in Saudi Arabia. So obviously Iran was not involved in that, as far as I know, from the public material stuff. But that idea of building nuclear reactors in the Middle East is not brand new for this administration. And I don't know what it means. I don't know how it's going to fall out. I just know there was a lot of mess over IP3 and the fact that the first Trump administration was trying to get nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia. And there was all kinds, you can Google that, there was all kinds of brouhaha about that because it looked like they were violating a law when they did that. But that may be another reason that he's trying to say, I obliterated their nuclear program. Now we can all be friends again, which in fact is what he put on his social media accounts. Congratulations, world, we have peace now. so that he could switch the conversation from, uh-oh, we've got this problem with nuclear proliferation in Iran, to that's okay. I took care of that. Now we can help probably the other Arab states, rebuild Iran, and we will be able to put in these nuclear reactors. I don't know. And that's out there now in a way that, quite frankly, I was surprised by, but it doesn't ring false to me because of that earlier IP3 program.